In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a custom lockpick, or at least how I make custom lockpicks. I've got a few here as an examples, different handle styles and different tips. The pick that we're going to be making today is going to be for this fella. This is John Doe. He does a lot for our community, and I wanted to say thank you by making him his very own custom lockpick. I asked John a series of questions about his perfect pick. He decided that a flat tip would be best in a medium rise. I then asked him about a wooden or acrylic handle. He chose acrylic. We then looked at the thickness of the steel, so 19 thousandths or 23 thousandths, and he went for 19 thousandths. I also asked if he wanted steel or brass pins, but he said it depends on the style of acrylic we used. I went over to the workshop to see what I had in stock, and this is my box of acrylic blanks. There's various different colours and styles. I sent a few photos over to John, and he chose this one, which is quite a vibrant orange colour. We only need about 2/3 thickness for our pick, so I'd cut this third off, and that will stay in my spares box, and I'll use that for another project. With the remaining 2/3, I have cut it right down the middle. It's a bit of a tricky procedure. Now, I use a Japanese pull saw. I mounted this in the vise and just carefully cut all the way down. Well, not quite all the way down. The pick handle needs to be around about 100mm, something like that. So we just need to cut this tip off. I'm only doing this roughly, so around about 110mm, and I'll just saw this tip off. That's our scales cut, so I'll just grab some 19 thousandths steel, and that's going to sit in there, something like that. Splitting the acrylic this way means that the pattern will line up for the final pick. It's now time to look at designs for John's handle. I've got a few different styles here. I tend to just sketch them out and then choose one when it comes to making a pick. I've got some that are in progress. That one lines up with that one, and that one lines up with that one. But we need to choose one that's suitable for John's needs. John said he picks pins up and pins down, and I think this design might just work for us. That'll be our handle. But I think what I'm going to do is just reverse the picking tip and face it that way. That should make it quite a versatile pick. We'll decide a little later exactly where that pattern falls within the handle. I think now it's time to cut the steel. So I'm going to take this clear tape, lay it over the paper, and then just trace it out with a Sharpie. With our template cut, we can see exactly where it's going to sit on our scales. I like this pattern at the front, and I think that's going to be the front of our picking handle. I think that should work well with the handle design that we've chosen. But what I need to do is take that template and find a good placement for it on our acrylic scales. That looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to use a scalpel now, and I'm going to cut out our template. Now that's decided, it's time to move on to our steel. So I'll take the negative of the template that I cut out, I'll lay it on the steel, and then I can mark this out to show me exactly where I'm going to cut. Once again, I'll use the Sharpie to trace around the template that I made earlier. I'll then feather and darken around the outside of that line so it doesn't get rubbed off when we come to grind it later on. There are various different methods to cut the steel. I like to use a hacksaw, and I'm going to use these 32 TPI, that's teeth per inch, hacksaw blades. You can use Dremel cutting wheels. I know some people do to cut the steel. I find that it gets the steel too hot, and I worry that it will then compromise the strength of the picking tip. I tend to make several small cuts. I cut down about 5mm at a time, raise the piece up, and then cut horizontally and remove little pieces of the steel as I go. In real time, it took me about 35 minutes or so to get to this stage. Now we'll move over to the grinder and refine our shape. It should go without saying that you need to use personal protective equipment when using tools like this. I'm going to work my way around the shape, getting rid of all these rough edges, smoothing things out, and I'm going to be quenching it in the water very often. Particularly when it comes to the tip, I do a little grind and then dunk, a little grind and dunk. If you let it get too hot, you're going to compromise the strength of your steel. Our handle is looking nicely shaped now. I think John should be able to pick pins up or pins down. It's a very comfortable shape to use. So we need to concentrate on our picking tip. To hold our steel steady while we shape, I like to use this wooden block. I've put a couple of cuts in with a saw. We slide our pick in there and it holds it really well while you file away the tip and the shaft of the pick. To shape the tip, I'm going to be using my file set. I got these recently from Velourby. It's a 6-piece set. They're not cheap, but they are really good. To hold everything steady, I'll clamp the wood in my bench vise. I highly recommend taking your time at this stage. It's very easy to take too much material off. Particularly when working on the tip, I tend to do a few strokes of the file, double check my work, and then a few more strokes of the file, slowly refining and shaping the tip. I'm in the habit of making hooks way longer than I need to, and then at this stage we can shorten it. So this is a bit too long, so I'm going to mark it a little bit shorter. We'll go over to the grinder and just shorten this tip by perhaps just a mil or two. That looks pretty good to me. I think I'm happy with this tip now. So what we're going to do before we get to polishing the steel, I'm just going to get rid of the grinding marks on the edge of the steel. And I like to use, I think it's 240 grit. And using the block to press against, I just rub the pick steel back and forward. That just gets rid of all those grinding marks, all of those file marks, and makes it nice and smooth. With my custom picks, I like a really polished steel, so we are going to wet polish or wet sand this. I'm going to start off with 800 grit and then 1000 grit, and then I'm going to use these micro mesh pads. They range from 1500 grit to around 12,000 grit, but we'll only go to about level 4, I think, with this pick. It's quite important not to press too hard while you're doing this. If you do that, you do risk rounding the edges of your pick profile. That's probably enough with the micro mesh pads. Let's head over to the buffing wheel. I've got some metal polishing compound on my gloves. This is the stuff that I like to use. I tend to use a generous amount of this because it upsets RWB custom picks when I use too much. We'll have to make this a two-part video because time is running short. When I finish the second part, I'm going to leave a link to it up there, and I'll leave a DMAC logo up there. If you hit that, you get to subscribe. As always, like and comment, and I will see you on part 2.